To get us warmed up, one thing that I've noticed is sort of and as a academic that's always frustrated with academia, there's like a tension between activism, academia, poetry, art. And so I would love to hear a little bit more about how you navigate those tensions across, sometimes that are seen as rigid boundaries, but can be more fluid than what we might normally think. So anyone who's motivated or inspired to speak, I'd love to hear. I'm going to sit here so I won't.
Well, I'll start us off and then not to say too much, but yeah, when I actually went to graduate school, it was partly to find a way to continue to do my interests, which were art and writing and I guess activism or being a good citizen or whatever you want to call it. And after about 25 years of mostly contingent positions, I'm in a position teaching online, and it is full-time, just yearly, but it's 100% teaching. And it's driving me crazy, to tell you the truth, because it really is 100% teaching. And it feels like, like when I signed that contract, I was like, but I'm giving away my whole life. And I'm determined not to do that, and that's why I'm here. But, it's very difficult, but it's very important, I think, to integrate all this stuff.
I think it's important to recognize where those boundaries are and cross them as much as you possibly can. I love coming to conferences, speaking at conferences. I also organize poetry events in the community where I have academics read and street poets, spoken word poets. My last event, there was 45 poets that day and 2 bands and a flash mob. So it's like, every person is welcome. Every person, every genre, every level of intellect was there and inspired and thrilled and wanting to get on the mic. It was open mic. So it was, I say cross those lines everywhere that you can, wherever you can, whenever you can.
I think in some ways it's harder to cross those lines in academia. So I was trained as an academic and taught for a couple years in universities and then left basically in order to work in the community to figure out a way to support social movement building via research and writing. But it's not romantic. It's very, very hard. Money is, the issue is money. The issue is where, are there institutions that exist that allow you to inhabit the spaces in between scholarship or intellectual work and activism and creative work, and there kind of aren't. So you do exist in between spaces, and then when I worked sort of full time as a community organizer, I thought that was going to be the solution, right, in a nonprofit context. But I couldn't work there for various reasons. One of which was I kind of realized that I was too much of a writer to really dedicate myself 100% just to activism. That there really is if you're going to write or you're going to be an artist, you have to have focused time to do that work, right? Even though there's a public phase to it where you can link it up with activism and stuff. But so I guess from all those institutional shifts, what I've discovered is it's all problematic and it's all uncomfortable. No matter where you go, there's a different set of problematics that you're dealing with. You still have to try, you still got to do it, but yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, and just adding to that, when I was thinking about the catalog, I don't think I really have an answer yet. I'm still looking for that balance. My 8 to 5 right now doesn't have anything to do with anything that I'm writing, and I just kind of keep it. Right now, my solution is to keep it separate. So my writing then can be, as radical as I want it to be. I'm also working on a dissertation, and in there I push boundaries whenever and wherever I can. I leave it up to my chair to tell me no. And then, the organization that I'm working on, I don't mention my affiliation to who I work with. I keep it separate. And that for now is what I'm gonna kind of try to do, because it's impossible. You can't always, but it always comes down to money. We do wish we could devote it, 100% to the writing and to the activism, but we live in a capitalist nation and things are all getting harder. And time, and then I'm a single mom on top of all of it, so yeah. So for me right now, the solution is creating alternative spaces. And in those spaces, feeling like, yes, I can say and I can write, and we can be as brave and open as we want to be. And people who want to enter that space. I think I've finally reached the point where I'm not going to apologize anymore. I think I'm at that age now where I think this is what I believe, this is what I think, and these things are wrong, and I'm not going to waver. And you can enter this space and you can have this conversation with me, on my terms.
Students, young people,
Or older people.
Or I'm sorry, teacher mode, I see these young people, I'm like, talk. But anyone else, I'm sorry, anybody.
As citizens, how do you put the initial question in a different way? As citizens of this country, how do you distinguish your activism and your professional life where you're earning money? I've heard it from one of you, but it sounds more, I shouldn't say but, and it sounds like a compromise in living a comfortable life and not upsetting the heart. But you have the right to do, that's my opinion, so I guess more of a comment, also to understand where you all are, where your foundation is. Family, divorce, family support, whether you're going to continue doing community organizing, whether you're going to go into a career route or even change route, or like most of us teach, because we're all role
I think
models.
teaching is very punk rock right now. It's like that's the only thing that will save our future is being a teacher. If you're not a lawyer.
So I guess my question is, how do you deal with being active citizen and an active worker?
My response would be that the compromise is not with us, the compromise is with the system where maximization of profits is the bottom line, all across the board, everything from healthcare to art to, it has become, it's intensified, I think, over the years and that's not to say it hasn't been there before, but at least in what I'm seeing, it has intensified to the point that we have the president we do and I think of myself as a world citizen, not really, I am a citizen of the United States and I try to take on those responsibilities because I think they're there, but I also think, that it's important to think of it in terms of the whole world.
I think it's important to be where you're at. I agree with you, Kamala, to be where you're at. Like, if you're working, fine, you're working. My husband goes to work and he works in one of those mainstream America call centers collecting for credit card, right? And the people around him in San Antonio, like some of them have bought into what mainstream media would have you believe, that the Turd administration would have you believe, and root for all the same team and all this. And they don't challenge anything. They celebrate Columbus Day, and San Antonio has changed it to Indigenous Peoples Day, and his workplace, in one instance, hadn't changed all that over, so he complained. And Lo and behold, they took everything down, took it all the way up to Milwaukee where headquarters are, and they don't celebrate Columbus Day the way they were before he complained. Now it's Indigenous Peoples Day if you so choose. You know, like I'm saying, just be where you're at, because we're all American, whether documented or not. We're all American. We're all here where we are, and even in this little circle, we still have movements to make. So let's make them, you know. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be trending. It's hard. It's hard work, and they've already done the work to dismantle us. So we undo or redo where we're standing.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, like, I think, like, my situation is probably a little, like, it sounds like your situation is probably, you know, like, where, I mean, I have a 9-to-5, basically, and it's not, like, if I call it a day job, it sounds like I'm putting it down, which it's not, I'm not, but, I mean, my job isn't political, but what it does is it allows me enough time outside of work. It doesn't take over my life. It doesn't like take over my life emotionally. I'm not super stressed out at that particular job. So that, you know, with the 10 to 15 extra leftover hours that I have during my week, like I can kind of, you know, and some weeks it's writing, and some weeks I'm more doing stuff in the community, and like, that's my time. So, yeah, you just, I mean, however little amount of time left over y'all have, that's your time.
So I do have a follow-up question, because this is a great opportunity for any one of you to ask a question that will help solve an issue that you may look forward to, like funding your education, starting a family, which is the economics of having a job or having your own business and being able to barter for the things that you need. You know, and those are decisions that we have to make. And if you live off the grid, you know,
Yeah, it's much harder to live off the grid than on the grid, yeah.
well, you have to plan for it, you know, and the idea of you being creative and having the people around you who are related or employment related is to get them to begin to support you in what you really like to do. How do you do that without getting frustrated? You have to find those allies, and then you have to move forward with a plan. It's not always resistance, it's cooperation.
I'd like to sort of touch on your question because, and I mentioned my street when I started, and I just want to, I don't think that plan is always the possibility, at least in the city. Actually, it's sort of playing off of the kind of displacement that you're talking about, except that it's a daily chronic thing that's going on. And just this week, my one set of neighbors were evicted from their house just like that. They had, I think, 4 dogs. One person took 1 dog. They kept 1 dog. No, it must have been 5 dogs. Anyway, little dogs. I mean, cute, nice dogs. But I live in the barrio. I live in the west side of San Antonio. And my across the street neighbors, who are very good friends, a family, they're on their SSI. It does not figure out to the amount of bills and payment on their place, which was paid for at one time by their family, but you know, it comes back in equity loan. Anyway, they took the folks into their daughter's little casita in the back to stay because they had no place to go and they hadn't made arrangements. I mean, maybe they'll have to go they can go to the Haven for Hope, or maybe they'll be able to find something else. But this is the kind of thing that's happening every day. And finally yesterday, there were 3 little dogs then left. And I'm saying the dogs because the dog catcher came by. Well, first they found out that they had to pay $25 or $35 a piece in order to get them adopted out. Then they couldn't do that. I mean, that's why they were leaving, right? And then the dog catcher came by and supposedly the police came by. We were like, my neighbor, child next door called me and, what's going on? And so I went over to find out because the police was over there, and there's a son who's trying to do exactly what you're talking about, but there's he was on the 6th floor of the jail for a couple weeks, and anyway, so I was worried. But it was just that they were going to send the dog catchers. The dog catcher came by. For some reason, she couldn't take the dogs. So now the dogs are still sitting there with, I mean, you know, they're getting fed and watered and everything. But nobody was asking what was happening for the people. You know, did they have a place? And even the dogs, we haven't solved yet. Of course, my neighbors, you know, I gave her my eggs and everything for the breakfast, because she said something last night when she'd come over, and she said, oh, I've got to feed them now. And I'm like, oh, duh, you know, they're in your backyard. But we take care of ourselves. That's the hopeful sign. But I don't know where to go with all of this. I mean, and so it's just, I guess it's important for me to say that, because I don't think anybody should feel bad when your plans don't turn out, and you should. But it is helpful to look at society and to look at the things that are causing those problems. And it's not just with you, and it's not just with somebody else, you know. And that's also what contributes to the domestic violence and stuff like that, because we get so frustrated and then we turn against each other. And I think that's the most important thing, not to do that.
I have a question for the room. I'm just wondering how many of you are writers or poets, like kind of what brought you to the panel?
Okay, well, recently in my 1301 class, my dual enrollment instructor, he works at UTRGV, and so he really likes to challenge us and make us read poetry, and I find it very interesting, especially when people who create poetry themselves read it to me. Like, it just continuously like interests my like, I don't know, I just love it. I just like poetry so much. And so I guess when people actually create it, I just like to know, like, where do you go in your mind, or what idea do you perceive in order to write such good like lines?
For me, poetry is a craft. That's not true for everybody. I start with, for myself, I start with like a news article or something that I lived and experienced that strikes a moment, like a photograph. You know, they say Kodak moment. Like, I try to make my poems a complete Kodak moment, so to speak. But I make demands of the work itself. It must be true. It must be something that I've experienced. It must be earthly connected, and it must be cosmically connected or spiritually connected. Because at the end of the poem, I want the poem to look like a wispy thread, you know, all through. And that's not true for every poet, but that's the demands that I make on my own work. Is it has to be factual in the sense of the word of I lived it, and then I craft it for the poetic devices of metaphor and rhythm. And it takes a long time for one poem. It takes me months or sometimes years, and it's a sculpture at the end.
I think so. Like on one level, like I can sort of understand how poetry happens, but then there's like this other level where like I really don't know where it comes from. Like it just like, but the part that I do kind of understand is like, poetry is ordinary. Poetry is like thinking. It's like you start thinking about something, you have an idea, you feel something taking shape in your mind, like you have a thought but in a particular way, you start putting it down. It's a poem. Like, and there's nothing, and I think like poetry can seem really like ethereal or like out of your reach or something, but like it's ordinary. Like, it's just people writing down, like, anything that happens to them, any experience that you have. Like, you write it down, you kind of play around with how it looks on the page. Like, well, what if I put this word at the end here? Oh, what if I moved it over here? You read it out loud. It's kind of like similar to a song. Like, so you're writing what you think or you feel, but then you're like paying attention to how it sounds in your mind, or like when you speak it out loud too. But then the part of it that like I really don't understand is just like, well, what puts the words in my mind to begin with? I don't know. Like, where does it come from? But yeah. But I mean, just having a habit of, you know, keeping a journal and just like writing down your experiences and playing around with the form of it. Yeah. It's within your reach.
I've taken poems, or found poems, and letter poems. I guess those are two things I'm just going to mention because, you know, it's pulling it out of experience. I mean, I do other kinds of poems too, but I think it's just recognizing that there's a poem there and then having the time to pull it out.
Yeah.
But
And I don't know if we're out of time, but I'll say really quickly that journaling is key. You have to accept it's all ritual and you know, like devotion to it. Like I'll sit down and say I'm gonna write for 20 minutes and I don't care what comes of it. Sometimes you'll produce something, sometimes you won't. You just have to respect the process. And reading, I think for me, reading is really, really important. Whatever craft or genre you want to study, I think that's key. Like reading from all types, like from old to new to what's come out this last year, and then that will kind of trigger some things too, some ideas.
All right, thank you. And so let's give them one more round of applause.